being the largest economy in Africa, we expect that Nigeria could be doing a lot more.
When this administration came in, the Nigerian economy was on a slide. So when we came in, we developed a plan, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. We had to get businesses producing again. So we came out with the Presidential Enabling Business Council.
Our reason for PEBEC is because we know that there is no other way but to have the private sector partnering with us to drive growth. Today we have a 7 trillion budget. But if you look at private sector, what the private sector does and private sector investment is in multiples of that. So the only way to ensure that we're able to grow at the pace we need to grow is to ensure that it is the private sector that drives that growth. And you can't drive that growth unless you have an environment that's favorable to business.
The SME sector is the engine of growth in most nations, and I think even particularly so in Nigeria because we're very entrepreneurial. So at the end of the day, the fulcrum, the center, the engine room of the growth of our economy is the SME sector.
The challenges that businesses face generally, and those are the three things that we took as the cornerstone of this project in every area that we work in, is the speed of doing business, the cost, and transparency, access to information. Without exception, reforms fall into those categories. So we took up the challenge to work on those things. We also try to be very responsive.
Prior to what had just happened, we had like 4 or 5 different forms we have to fill. Now we have one single form. Then we also deployed the company's registration portal, which enables customers to now do the registration online for the comfort of their office or their home.
We have made it easy to pay tax. So you can pay your taxes online. You can pay your taxes anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection. And basically you can also download your receipts immediately.
We have a situation where every permit, every approval is required in terms of regulation. There's a stipulated time frame in which our agency needs to respond. And to the extent that we don't respond within that timeline, the applicant will deem the application approved. One of the bottlenecks we have that sort of challenges ease of doing business in the port is the congestion of cargo. So we would realize the need to deploy rail, for example. We have minimal rail access into the port locations. We're working with the Nigerian Railway Corporations to enhance evacuation of cargo through the rail.
The National Assembly made a commitment from inception that we will improve the business environment in Nigeria, and then the issue of credit came, because it was first a requirement people have to get credit to be able to establish small businesses and the rest. And then we said, okay, fine, we will do the credit reporting with you, and then we will do the movable assets bid to provide an enabling environment for investment in Nigeria.
What we have done in Lagos State is to designate 15 courts now over the 7 magisterial districts that we have in Lagos State. And it's the first of its kind in this country. From the inception of filing of their claims to the service hearing of evidence in the court and to the conclusion of that matter, which will be the judgment of the matter, must not exceed 90 days. This will encourage more business activities.
Nigeria's journey in this has been quite phenomenal. I also want to mention something that's very particular to Nigeria and the work that MEDUS and PEBEC are doing, which is that they looked at the issues and they said, look, airports are very important to us. Entry and exit of people is something that we want to tackle. When an investor comes, first thing they get to the country is the airport. Let's take a look at our airports. And I really, really think it was such a great idea.
Unlike before, you apply for visa, it stays for 1 month, 2 months, nobody applies. Now we have mandated our office that you need to respond within 48 hours. This is easy business.
By October 2017, when the results came out on the 31st of October, we moved up 24 points. We were one of the 10 most reformed economies in the world in 2017. We became number 6 in the world in areas of getting credit. Now what this does is that it makes you realize that with a systemic approach, focusing on impact, you get results.
I think it's one of the most significant strides in terms of the economy we've had in this administration. One, it shows that there is hope in terms of the efforts we've been putting so far, and secondly, it means things are actually working.
Investors like the direction in which government is going. They believe that even if things are not moving as fast as they would like, they are moving in the right direction. So investors can plan on the basis that the improvements will continue.
I think for us, remember that the vision is to become one of the most attractive and easiest places to do business in the world. That's a tall order. Now, what it means is that we must continue to improve. It's a journey of continuous improvement. What we would like to see is in the year 2019, when the Financial Times will write an article talking about the economic miracle in Nigeria and saying that the secret was because we improved the ease of doing business.
Thank you very much for watching. Very quickly, we'll now go into a set of presentations just to give more context to that. The idea was to set the background and also attempt to help this event by bringing some of your panelists on the screen. I believe the NIPC was meant to be here, so that was on the screen. So if you just go to the presentation quickly and... okay. Is this working? All right. Okay, so we set the tone, and the ease of doing business reforms and the project itself is not in isolation. It's within a larger framework of what we can call, a government's economic intervention. As you remember, Nigeria slid into a recession sometime in 2016, and the response of the government to that was the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Now, the third pillar of that plan speaks to building a competitive economy. And that's where the ease of doing business reforms basically sit. Because in that plan, we speak about providing infrastructure, roads, rail, power, and all of that. And there are interventions for that. But the complement to that, to the hard infrastructure, is what we call the soft infrastructure, which is basically creating an enabling environment in which to do business. The numbers here, and I won't bore you with this, many of you are already familiar with the fact that, of course, Nigeria has come out of the recession, is back on a growth trajectory. The economy is projected to grow by about 2.3% this year. Inflation is down to about 11.3%. The external reserves are up to about $49 billion. So in terms of positive indicators, we are beginning to see positive indicators of growth. But where I would like to go to is... right. Okay. Where I'd like to go to is for you to understand why the ease of doing business reforms. Right now, we are 145th out of 190 countries. Again, that's not a place that Nigeria should be at all in the context of, one, our potential, our size in Africa, and our position in the world. However, if you remember where we're coming from, you would realize that this is actually a step in the right direction. Just before the 145 position ranking, we're actually 169th. And in the space of 1 year, just by a specific set of reforms, widely acknowledged, we've been able to move 24 positions up. Our aspiration is basically to move into the 100th position and then into the top 50. Because we use these numbers as a measure, not because it's the end in itself, but it's a means to an end. If you think about the countries that are in the top 50 position, and that's what this graph basically explains. If you look at the top right-hand corner, the countries that you like to travel to, the countries that you already probably live in, Norway, Switzerland, Singapore, the USA, New Zealand, these are countries that are top ranked in terms of the ease of doing business. And you immediately see that even the standard of living, the per capita income in those countries are also very high. So it goes without saying that in improving the ease of doing business, you're actually improving the economic prosperity of an economy. Now, this is how Nigeria has been over the past years. A lot of neglect in terms of ease of doing business reforms, in terms of bottlenecks to allowing private sector interact with regulators or interact with government agencies. Unfortunately, at the onset of this government, we're basically able to stop the bleeding, and now we're on 145 and on a positive growth trajectory in terms of rankings.
Now, the coordinated intervention to that started really in July 2016 when His Excellency the President set up the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. And that council is chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, as you saw in the video that was shown previously. And really, the idea here is to have a coordinated effort towards addressing the business environment in Nigeria. Because as you've heard again, Nigerians are very enterprising, very entrepreneurial. So it only goes without saying that this sector or this section of the economy should be looked at. SMEs, account for almost 50% of GDP. They employ almost 80% of the labor force. So it's an important aspect of the economy. And so there should be a coordinated intervention towards easing the way they do business. And that's the idea of PEBEC. The structure of PEBEC, and I dare say the miracle of PEBEC, is that there is a lot of collaboration. First, it's chaired by His Excellency the Vice President himself. He sits at every meeting. I've attended probably about 12, it holds every month, and I think I can count only 2 meetings that he was not physically present. So he's on top of the situation, he's interested in it, in making Nigeria a progressively easier place to do business. And we have ministers, cabinet ministers in the room, from the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, to the Minister of Budget and National Planning, the CBN Governor, Minister of Finance. Basically, every minister that interacts frequently or as much as possible with the business environment is in the room. And the reason for this is because you need the highest political buy-in in order to do anything in this country. You and I will agree that if you get it at the top, then it's easier for it to immediately, gradually cascade down to even the level officer at the reception in any agency. And that's why we have this structure. And this structure has ensured that we collaborate more and more with the National Assembly, with the judiciary, in terms of reforms that we're working on. And we'll go into the reforms shortly. Our interventions have basically been in systematic ways. Now, I'm going through this step-by-step explanation to let you appreciate the rigor and the deliberate effort towards easing the business environment. And there's no better way to engage the diaspora than to actually tell you what we are doing in Nigeria for Nigerians. Our interventions have basically been in terms of 60-day national action plans. Now, we've taken this approach because sometimes you need to be very intense in the way you go about changing or executing reforms. So we take a 60-day period and we call it an accelerated reform program, where we look at the most impactful reforms for the business environment at that point in time. At the first 60-day national action plan last year in February, between February and April, we took about 8 indicators, about 8 initiatives that we wanted to work on. And we also looked at, during that time also, His Excellency the Vice President, then Acting President, signed the executive order. There were 3 executive orders signed, but one of them was specific to the doing business environment. And the combination of the 60-day national action plan and the implementation of that executive order is what led us to the 145th position that we attained in terms of the World Bank Doing Business rankings. And just to note that at that point, our target was to move 20 places up, but we actually moved 24 places up. And we're acknowledged by the World Bank as one of the top 10 most reformed economies in 2017. Now, I've said this because many times you and I will argue that, what is the impact? We are not seeing it on the streets and all of that. But the truth is that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. If you look at where we were coming from and where we are right now, you realize that a lot of things have changed and are changing gradually, and we'll show you many of these things. Now, going forward from that time, we've also gone into deeper reforms in terms of, we're now also looking at, the state governments also, subnational interventions, and we'll talk about that. We've we've expanded the net, and we've looked at other reforms that are impactful to the economy. We've adopted the World Bank methodology because it is something that is actually used across 190 countries, and instead of reinventing the wheel, you might as well adopt something and then improve on that. So even though we use the World Bank Doing Business indicators, we have also gone ahead, based on feedback from stakeholders, to look at what we call homegrown indicators. And those indicators also speak to reforms that you and I would like to see in the business environment. And just to let you have a sense of it, in the life cycle of any business, for you to start a business in Nigeria, you have to interact with the CAC. You have to register the business. Depending on the type of business, you probably have to do a construction somewhere or buy a property somewhere. So you're interacting with the state government because they are that's under their jurisdiction. You have to pay taxes. You have to at some point interact with the courts, or you have to attempt to get credit from the banks or from the microfinance banks. Or even in terms of, if there's an insolvency or something, you may need to enforce a contract and interact with the courts. Or if you want to dissolve entirely and you want to, disengage from the business. So we've looked at all these sections. Even you may need to export also, so there's trading across borders. And many more. So we've looked at all these sections and taken reforms in those areas that we believe will immediately deliver results to the small and medium scale sector in the economy. But one of the feedback that we got, for instance, in trading across borders, is that, look, in a room like this, we had a stakeholder forum, and people stood up and said, look, you are looking at import and export. Even in Nigeria, it's difficult just to move your goods around the country before we start talking about import and export. And so what we did was to look at the set of agencies that affect moving goods within Nigeria. The police force, the customs, Standards Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC, the NOTAP office, that's technology acquisition, and the trademarks office in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And we've taken this together to call it Trading Within Nigeria Indicator. And we are constantly working with these people, and we'll let you see what that is. So not to bore you anymore, I'll just go straight into what we've seen in terms of impact, in terms of doing business. As we speak today, and the CAC can bear us witness, you can actually register your business online within 24 hours. Well, we still say 24 hours, but the CAC will actually tell you can do it in 5 hours. I wish they had some of the operations in the room right now. You can actually go online on the CAC portal, register, search for a business name, do a business reservation, pay the right fees, and get incorporation. Now, you don't only just get incorporation. At the end of that, you get your tax identification number. If any of you have set up a business in Nigeria, you will know that before now, it was not even an online process. First, you take a whole file of papers and you walk into a CAC office and you start that process. And it may not even be you, it will be your lawyer. And the lawyer will tell you to take 2 or 3 months, and then you keep waiting and praying. And when you finish that, you pack that same file and move to the FIRS and start begging for your tax identification number. But now, those 2 things have been integrated online, such that at the end of incorporation, you get your TIN number and you're a fully incorporated business. Now, those are some of the reforms that we've seen. And this slide basically just speaks to impact across a lot of the reforms that we've looked at. And this is what I want to dwell on as I go on. The next one is in terms of registering property. In Lagos and Kano, and we speak to Lagos and Kano because these are the first states that we took on. Lagos being the most populous and commercially active in, if you like, the southern region, Kano being the most populous and commercially active in the north. And we've taken these 2 economies at first to interact with them in terms of registering property and dealing with construction permits. Because as you know, when you invest in Nigeria, you don't really invest in Nigeria. You invest in Lagos, you invest in Kano, you invest in Kaduna. You invest in a state, you situate your business in a location. So in interacting with these states, we've got them to make their processes easier in terms of, first, let us even know the process through which you get a construction permit. Before now, many of you don't even know. Some architect or town planner just tells you it is XYZ, and you keep negotiating. But now, if you go on the Lagos State website, on the Lands Bureau website, or the Physical Planning Permit website, you can see their procedures, including the fees that you need to pay, such that when you are interacting with your consultant, town planner, or architect, you are already equipped with the information that you need, and nobody is shortchanging you or asking you to pay unofficial fees. The same thing has happened in Kano. Now, many of these things have helped to ease the business environment. In Lagos, they've dropped the cost of a construction permit. Before now, if an SME wants to build just a 2-story building or thereabout, you probably have to pay about 6 million naira in terms of the infrastructure development charge that goes to the Lagos State government. Now, you and I know that the average 2-story building is for pure water business or tabled water or something like that. Now, the Lagos State government has dropped that and taken it out and has therefore reduced the cost of obtaining a construction permit. The same thing in registering property. The Lands Bureau is now more robust. You can search for your title deeds in an automated room in the Lands Bureau office. This is also happening in Kano State. But I think that in terms of the states, the greatest innovation for now is that you can actually pay all your fees online. There is a Kano State integrated portal which allows you to pay all your fees to the state government depending on what it is online. That removes a lot of discretion in government, in the government staff that you interact with. It removes the issues of unofficial fees, and that's the kind of information or automation that we're bringing to the table. One important one, and that's or two more, and those are the ones I'll dwell on, are getting credit. In Nigeria, currently, we are ranked as the 6th in the world in terms of getting credit. But we've always had this conversation that, look, how can you be number 6 when SMEs cannot access credit? Now, it is true that a lot of SMEs are finding it difficult to access credit. But the first step to that is making sure that the legal framework by which you are able to access credit exists. And what is that legal framework? As we speak today, 2 laws have been passed. And those laws are basically the Collateral Registry Act and the Movable Assets, the Credit Bureau Act and the Collateral Registry Act. And what those two say is that every citizen, every SME is entitled to a first credit rating in terms of obtaining a credit score. And secondly, that you can actually register movable property as collateral for business or for accessing credit. So what that means is that instead of bringing your grandmother's birth certificate or her landed property, you can actually register your own, use your own movable property. If you have a farmland and you have tractors, you can use that as collateral. You can use cars as collateral. So it's now in the court of the banks, and that's why we keep having stakeholder engagements to ensure that they are sensitizing, as we are also sensitizing SMEs, not just sending them away, but letting them know that, look, you have collateral that you can use. It's no longer just landed property. And we're engaging a lot of microfinance banks on that. As we speak today, there are about 497 microfinance banks that have registered or have registered some property through the borrowers from them on the collateral registry. We have about 30,000 financial statements there. The size of registered property or assets on the collateral registry right now is about 620 billion. Now, this didn't exist before in the sense. So, as we say, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We're gradually getting there. I think the one that might interest you most is perhaps when you're bringing missions into Nigeria, investor missions, you're having investor visits. And this one doesn't even speak to the World Bank indicators. It's for us. It's the entry and exit of people, where we talk about the electronic visa on arrival. Now, as we speak right now, we have a delegation in Nigeria going around assessing our reforms, and that delegation came in through the electronic visa on arrival. All it took was making sure that I sent them the link of the immigration portal with the guidelines there, and they made their payments by themselves. They engaged with immigration by themselves, came into Nigeria and got the visas right here and proceeded into the country. So it works. The portal is it's the immigration portal, and it works. Is there any immigration officer here who can give us the? Okay, all right. So please search for it. It's immigration.gov.ng. It works. So please check it. And in speaking about it works is where I think my time is up. So. Do I still have more time? Oh, it's getting interesting. All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so since it's getting interesting, I'll speak a little more. So let me just say things about what we're doing right now in 2018. And again, this speaks to the business environment. As we speak today, the Company and Allied Matters Act has been reenacted, repealed first and then reenacted by the Senate. Now, what that means, if anybody knows what the CAMA is, it's probably the largest piece of legislation affecting business in Nigeria. It's been on for about 28 years or more. And what we've done is to bring it closer to modern day practices. What do we mean by that? Before now, or actually currently, until the House of Reps also harmonizes and is signed by the President, currently you need a second person for you to register a business. So if you're registering a business, and seriously, just to correct, yeah, you need a second person to register a business. So if you're registering a business, your lawyer will probably ask you, look, add somebody to it, a director that probably has the expertise to what you're saying you want to do and things like that. But the new CAMA will allow you, a single individual, to register his own business. Now that is very innovative, especially when you think about the large size of entrepreneurs that we have in Nigeria. You know, so many startups. Somebody has an idea. He wakes up in the morning, he got an idea, he can go on the CAC portal, reserve a business name, pay a fee, and get incorporated. And so you can see that these are the origins of how even modern societies that we talk about today started and, you know, immediately went into an innovative drive. We talk about the LLPs, the limited liability partnerships, an opportunity where partners, you know, and these are very modern terms, even in the business space globally. You talk about the reservation of names online. You talk about the seal now becoming optional. That very heavy metal that you basically have to use to seal everything. Without that, the banks will not. It will say you haven't done anything. So now it's an optional. Use. You can actually have your electronic signature used. So once this bill is passed, what that means is that even electronic signature, so you can sit anywhere in the world and authorize transactions using an electronic signature. So this is the KAMA bill. The next one is also similar to it, the omnibus bill. What we're doing is that apart from the KAMA, we're also looking at other interventions that may be affecting business. And so we're going into different laws and scooping up all these things and amending them in one single legislation called the omnibus bill. Now this is currently work in progress. I've spoken about the fact that we are going into states now and also replicating this payback model across the states. So if you're interacting directly with states, you'll probably realize that some states have an ease of doing business champion or an ease of doing business agency. These are interventions that came from the federal level and is now cascading into the states. And again, at the end of this year, we will actually have a report of the states. It's the Subnational Business Survey, which basically tells us that every state has something to offer. So we want to show the relative attractiveness across the states. So it's not just about, you know, World Bank rankings. One state is number 1, one state is number 37. That's not the idea. The idea here is to showcase what every state has to offer. I think where I would land finally is the PEBEC report. Now what this is an online feedback mechanism that allows you and I interact. And this basically came about based on stakeholder interactions as we have very frequently. Now, I talked about the trading within Nigeria indicator, where it said, you know, the customs, the police, SON, NAFDAC, and the rest of them. So what we've done is to create a portal where you can actually give us feedback online. So if you go online and you type on your phones right now, pebec.report, PEBEC.report, it takes you to a web portal where you can either lodge a complaint about a government agency or give positive feedback about a government agency. As we say in Nigeria, if we do well, tell others. If we do bad, tell us. So please tell us what we are doing that is either right or wrong so that we can improve on it. Without this feedback, without you testing the system, we cannot know what is working or what is not working. It is very important that in interacting with government agencies, as government is trying to make them more efficient, it is important that you do not circumvent the system. And you and I know what I'm talking about. We all have our ways of getting things done. But it's important that you do not circumvent the process. It's important that you follow the process that has been set out so that we can know if that process works or not. Without us knowing that, we cannot make it better. So it's important that you please test this. Go on pebec.report. If you have any issues, if you have any positives, please put it there. Currently, we have 9 agencies there. We work with about 44 agencies, so we're expanding that portal. And as you know, there are probably about 960 agencies altogether in the government. So it's a portal that has a lot of room for expansion. So please go on it. I know the customs is there, NAFDAC is there, the police force is there, the FRS is there, the CAC is there. So please go on it. If you have any interventions or if you have any positive or negative feedback, please let us know. The reason why I'm saying this is because the Federal Executive Council has mandated, and it's a directive by Council, that they have a 72-hour response time to every complaint that comes up there. So if you issue a complaint, that agency is mandated to respond to you within 72 hours or there will be consequences. And that's a Federal Executive Cabinet directive. So we are taking it seriously. Also, we have this same portal set up at our airport. So if you go to the international airport, at the arrival wing D, I believe, and the arrival wing E, you will find desk portals there where you can lodge report. So immediately you leave the immigrations and the quarantine people. If they treated you badly, you can just quickly put it out there. So, all right. So we have that, and we also have that in Abuja. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stop here so that we can have room for questions and discussions. Thank you very much for your time.